Welcome to the Online Great Books podcast, brought to you by onlinegreatbooks.com, where we talk about the good life, the great books, great conversation, and great ideas.
Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to the Online Great Books podcast. This is Brett. I am the producer. Sorry about our absence last week, but we are back this week and next with a great adventure. Scott and Karl will begin discussing today a collection of short stories about frontier life, originally published in the 1940s. It was written by Dorothy M. Johnson, and it is called Indian Country. The book actually includes some very famous stories from the West, including The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Now, I had seen the movie. We've all seen the movie. Have you not seen the movie? What are you, a communist? But I had never read the story. After listening to Scott and Karl's discussion, I found and read the story, and I'm thinking you might be compelled to do the same with many of the 11 stories in this book. Here's what you need to know ahead of time. Scott and Karl will spoil every story that they discuss. So you're going to want to be swift about obtaining your copy of the book. It's pretty easily obtainable. They're mostly very enjoyable stories about a kind of pioneer resilience. I love Westerns, but even if you don't like Westerns, I can imagine you would enjoy this. So that's it. Thank you, as always, for your time and attention. Thank you for listening. And I am proud to present to you now the podcasting dream team of Scott Hambrick and Karl Shute.
I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl Shute.
And today, I would like to welcome you to an undisclosed location, Karl.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'll ever fit into the undisclosed location, but so far it's all right.
Say more about this.
I don't know. I was at the Home Depot in the undisclosed location a while back, just buying some sand and everything. And everybody's giving me, because they're friendly here, and they're giving me the nod and the waves and everything. They don't know I'm not one of them. And I felt a little uneasy. But
they probably did, but they do that anyway.
Well, I hadn't talked.
Yeah,
so
but look at you.
Yeah. Lots and lots of gardening to do. Yeah, so just trying to get, we got started late, and I'm trying to get everything in that I can get in. You're not supposed to plant in June, unless you have to.
Yeah. It doesn't matter that you're late this year in the undisclosed location, because it's been a disaster for everybody already, so it's fine.
Well, my potatoes are good. I need to fertilize them, I think. We got the squash in, and they're popping out. I hope they don't get washed away today. Got some sweet corn planted, so we're going to feed the deer. And pumpkins. I think I got to redo the carrots. I think I messed them up. So I'm reading the
Carrots are tough.
Gardening When It Counts book, and I haven't seen a carrot yet.
Carrots are tough.
And that was like a week and yeah. So I think I'm going to double dig and make a nice ditch and or a nice raised bed, and we're just going to make a trough and just pour a bunch of seeds in it and see if anything comes up, because I like carrots.
Yeah, me too. I do too. They're miraculous things. They're weird. Have you given any thought to what we're going to read after this one, Karl?
Oh, yeah, I saw you put a list. Lovecraft, is interesting. To the Mountains of Madness might be good. It's been a million years since I read it. It's a novella. I think it's set in Antarctica.
Maybe we should read one you haven't read.
Beyond the Ice Wall. I think I read all of them a million years ago. We can find them.
I've never read a word of Lovecraft.
It's a treat. It's spooky. Yeah. Little House on the Prairie sounds great. The Foundation, we would just do the one Foundation book, I think, is important. I saw how you spelled Asimov on the list. It's important. I've said this on the Slack channel, maybe here too, that Foundation was a bad good book.
Right.
No, a good bad book that I think had a bad effect on me. Yeah, plenty of stuff. The Shiloh book by Shelby Foote, that'd be good. I haven't read Servile State.
I haven't either.
Tell me, how do you say Hulebeck? Is that right?
Hulebeck?
What is that thing?
Extreme right-wing French author Michel Houellebecq. I don't know. He has gotten in trouble and canceled all over the place, so that's a landmine I'm all for stepping on. His first book was a biographical essay on horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. He wrote a book not too long ago about Islam and its effect on France. It's called Submission, I think, that has gotten him in bad trouble. But I would like to read that eventually, but I'm kind of interested in the elementary particles. Yeah, he's.
Is it actually about elementary particles?
Somewhat. Yeah.
Or are they like a metaphor?
They are a metaphor, but I believe there's a little stuff, a little bit of that kind of wacky stuff in there too. I haven't read it yet, but I think there's some allusions to that stupid kind of physics. But can I make a motion that we read the Asimov stuff next? Because our super fan Paul messaged me. He said, "I've read that. You guys talked about it. I read it forever ago, and I'm waiting."
Which super friend Paul?
Oh, I don't.
Well, you can tell me.
He goes by Otterskin on the social medias.
Oh yeah.
So we'll do that. Is that the first Foundation one?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't need to read the whole trilogy.
I read those.
I think the trilogy ends up with 5 or 6 books in it anyway.
Gosh.
As they tend to.
I read those. I was probably in the 7th grade. Maybe. Is that first one, is it just Foundation?
I might have been younger. Our friend Thomas put a thread in about, bad things in 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s sci-fi, and there's a lot of bad things in that stuff, and I read almost all of it. And
yeah, they're filthy, dirty bastards.
Messed me up. I love lots of it, but lots of it was pretty bad for me, I think. And Asimov he doesn't write any sex scenes. That's not why he's bad. There's more subtle reasons why I think he's bad, but I still enjoy him.
Yeah. Don't get me.
So stay tuned for that.
Started on Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah. There have been revelations about him.
I was more of a Clarke guy, actually, way back then in the 80s than an Asimov guy. But yeah, we'll read that one next. We'll cover that next. That'll be a delight. But it will not be as big of a delight as this most recent collection of short stories that we read on Marcia Enright's suggestion. Indian Country is the name of it. It was put out by, Valance for 35 cents back in, I don't know, let me look at the date on this thing, 1949, and last copyright was 1953. 35 cents would get you this thing, and I don't know how you would spend 35 cents any better. This thing is amazing, I think.
Yeah, it's unable to be found online, as far as I can tell. We were talking we tried to do this before, but a storm cut us off. We were talking about scanning this thing up. It needs to be digitized. I had to rebind my copy because the pages were coming out as I was reading it. I would have just had to make a pile. So I redid it, and maybe we spend $5 and get another copy and separate it out and scan it up just for posterity. It's wonderful. I saw the cover and I thought, gosh, this is going to be, a cheesy Western book. This is some cheesy crap that Hamburg likes. No, I really, really liked it. I finished it last night at 2 a.m. I think it's really good. I think maybe you ought to go grab a copy, but not before we get our sacrificial copy to scan.
Right. Well, wait, the clock's ticking.
Don't buy them all up yet.
The clock's ticking. We'll do this before it comes out. The show comes out. It's by Dorothy M. Johnson. I think a lot of these stories were written for publication in monthly magazines. There was a lot of that in the mid-century. Esquire bought a lot of them. Saturday Evening Post. A lot of authors that you love kind of cut their teeth in either like pulp crime and science fiction magazines or kind of more legitimate stuff like The Atlantic or Esquire or so on. And Miss Dorothy, she's from Montana. She GTFOH'd and went to New York City, but she came back. She went back.
Yeah, I read one biography of her she tried to be a New Yorker.
Yeah, and it's clear that this. If you read this book, it's clear that there's no way she could have. The sense of life that comes through this book right up into your face is astounding to me. And that's why Marcia loved it. The character of the author is just all over the thing. I can't imagine her doing anything other than a Western. She has to have the Western genre, I think, probably to be like this, to do her kind of art. This is take 2. We already recorded, and then a storm messed us all up. And Karl asked in the first one, take 1, what is a Western?
Mm-hmm. I have thoughts on that. So, dear listener, I don't know if you've ever read Western stories. You probably have and didn't know it. I was said before, the first and best parts of Star Wars are a Western. That wonderful short sci-fi series Firefly is a Western. I would characterize it as it's like desert literature. Not necessarily a dry desert, but your characters are out in the middle of nowhere. There aren't many people around. Anything that they do becomes magnified. So if you stub your toe or you cut your toe, you're going to have to cut off your own foot when it gets gangrenous because there's nobody you can go to. When you see visitors coming to your homestead, they're not going to just be saying hi. They're either going to marry your daughter or they're going to kill all of you. All of your actions become magnified in this setting. I lived out in the desert I lived in Phoenix, it's kind of the desert, for 6 months, and I really liked it. And I told my brother that, and he's like, why? He likes forests. He wants trees around him all the time. And, well, because you can see for miles. Everything's clear in the desert. You can see to the horizon, and you could see the vulture, that's 30 miles away. And I like that. And I think the fiction has that same feel to me. And I think Dorothy M. Johnson, I don't know anything about her. I know very little about her. But she writes like that feels to me.
The writing.
Does that make sense?
Yes, especially after you've read it. I told you when you were over here at the house that this writing is just tight as a banjo string. It's her writing is what I want and what I want to read. She puts your focus right where it needs to be. And, people give praise to Hemingway for his tight prose and whatever. And it's not clear to me if Hemingway was a genius or if he was mentally disabled. If he was handicapped. There's 2 ways you could write really simple sentences. One is intentionally, and 2, that's all you can do. Right? And that's not clear to me what was up with Papa Hemingway. But with her, I'm certain that she's doing this on purpose. I'm going to read just the first paragraph of the first story, Flame on the Frontier. But before I do that, go to onlinegreatbooks.com and get on the waiting list. Join us there, please, would you? You're not going to eat out as much. I know that nobody has any money because they're stealing all of our money. But what left that you do have, you can use with us for both entertainment and intellectual purposes. Like what we do is a great deal of fun. You're not going to be going out to eat. You're not going to go to the movie theater. You're probably going to cut back on a bunch of your subscriptions. And though we are a subscription, you will get far more companionship, camaraderie, fun, intellectual stimulation, and books from us than you will any of those others. So help us out. Keep the boat afloat, guys. Come on, help us out.
A couple of years from now, when you're in the gulag, making small rocks out of big rocks, you'll have a wonderful interior life because you will have read a whole bunch of good stuff. And so you'll be standing there swinging your sledgehammer or your pickaxe, and you'll be better off than the guy next to you.
That's true. And if we don't end up in a gulag and you're just in the cubicle again, like 2020, 2019, well, you already said it. Same thing. I want to read the first paragraph of Flame on the Frontier by Dorothy M. Johnson. This is a collection of short stories. Here we go. On Sunday morning, wearing white men's sober clothing, a Sioux chief named Little Crow attended the church service at the lower agency and afterwards shook hands with the preacher. On Sunday afternoon, Little Crow's painted and feathered Santee Sioux swooped down on the settlers in a bloody massacre. There was no warning. Okay, there's that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how she writes. And there's some better chunks that we'll probably point out here later. I finished this book and just loved it, was just enthralled by it, and finished it. Well, I've had a book on my list for a long time. It's called The 42nd Parallel. It's volume 1 of the USA trilogy by John Dos Passos. This book makes a lot of you ought to read them snotty lists. It's one of these books that, snotty people say you should read. He's one of the lost generation and all this shit, So I finally got to it. I finally was like, I'm going to crack this open. I don't have anything else to read right now urgently. So here I went. Page 1, paragraph 1, USA by John Dos Passos. The young man walks fast by himself through the crowd that thins into the night streets, semicolon. Feet are tired from hours of walking, semicolon. Eyes greedy for warm curve of faces, answering flicker of eyes, the set of a head, the lift of a shoulder, the way hands spread and clench. Blood tingles with wants. Mind is a beehive of hopes buzzing and stinging. Muscles aching for the knowledge of jobs, for the roadmenter's pick and shovel work, the fisherman's knack with a hook when he hauls on the slithery net from the rail of the lurching trawler, the swing of the bridgeman's arm as he slings down from the white-hot rivet, the engineer's slow grip wise on the throttle, the dirt farmer's use of his whole body when, woeing the mules, he yanks the plow from the furrow. Period. That's the first period. The young man walks by himself, searching through the crowd with greedy eyes, greedy ears taught to hear, by himself, alone. I read 2 pages of this, and I was like, I'm not going to live long enough.
James Joyce is better.
Dorothy Johnson is slinging those words. I mean, she's so good at it, but she writes short stories in the Western genre for periodicals. So nobody's going to be blowing smoke up her tush like they are Dos Passos or Graham Greene or, whatever, right? Or Thomas Hardy or, whoever, what's his name? Miller, Tropic of Capricorn, all these dicks, they're not going to do that because this is just wholesome and wonderful. And she writes about people who are the way you wish you were.
Wholesome isn't a word I would have thought. Strange characters, hard men, hard women in these stories. There's no judgment of them. And that she's kind of Homeric. She just shows you stuff. And then you have to figure out if you think they should have done what they did.
They all should have done everything they did.
I want to read the fourth paragraph. The Santee Sioux sweeping down. There's Hannah Harris. There's Mary Amanda. And then there's, I think there's another kid. I forget her name. Sarah. Mary Amanda put down the book she had borrowed from a distant neighbor and went unwillingly out of the cabin. She liked to read and was proud that she knew how, but she never had another book in her hands as long as she lived. Mary Amanda Harris was on that day in August in 1862 just barely 13 years old. So you have these 2 girls that are out going, I forget what they're doing, go get more butter from the spring, because that's where you would keep your butter because it'd be cool. And you have that these little hints that she's putting. You don't know what's going to happen. But for me, it's like I said earlier, if you've got your homestead on your 500 acres and you see somebody crest the ridge in a Western, that's a big deal. In a city, New York literature, none of those people matter. They're not part of your story. They're landscape.
Like that Dos Passos garbage I just read.
Yeah. I read that. Uh-oh. Something's going to happen. Well, they get set upon. It's killer. It's not a true story, but it's true to life. It's the sort of thing that would happen. The lady that went on to become the mother of the last Comanche chief was taken away from her farm and all her people were killed. It's the sort of thing that happened. Cultural assimilation.
This, I get to tell a story. I want to tell a story. They go down to the spring where the butter is, was talking to Charity's granddad, and he said, during the Depression, nobody had Adair County, Oklahoma. Hell, they barely have air conditioning or refrigeration there now, but they darn sure did in the Great Depression. He said they'd go down, they'd put stuff in the spring too, and their neighbors would as well. Just that was the best place to put it, and it was a walk. And he said during the Depression, it got to the point where you couldn't hardly put stuff in the spring because people would eat it. You'd go back and your butter wasn't there, or or your milk wasn't there, or whatever, because the neighbors took it. And you got to understand that the neighbors would take that and eat it, knowing that you would know it was them that did it. Like, you guys live together. It's not like you live in a giant apartment building and someone stole your Amazon package. No, you're like, the Jenkins ate all the butter. And there would be consequences of that, But what are they going to do? The better thing to do maybe would be come and ask. But the McCulleys, which is my grandfather's, or Charity's grandfather's family, couldn't spare it. That's 1934.
Mm-hmm.
This story is placed in 1862. It's not too far. None of this stuff's that too far in the past for me.
Oh, yeah. The past is yesterday.
Yeah. I'm oppressed by it.
Yeah, I came across something really neat yesterday. I was looking up pictures of my paternal grandfather because he looked like John Wayne, and I couldn't find any online, and I've got some, but I don't know where they're stored. I was watching a John Wayne movie with my daughter, setting up some furniture, and she knew I liked The Quiet Man. She didn't like it the first time, but I think she liked it better the second time because she didn't understand why Maureen O'Hara would need for John Wayne to go and grab her and make her walk. She didn't understand that. I said, that's what she wanted. That's the happiest she ever is in that movie. So my dad loves John Wayne movies, and I like him too. And I said to him one day, John Wayne looks a lot like your dad. And he just looked at me and said, well, I'm glad somebody else noticed. So he'd known this, he'd seen this the whole time, and then I saw it independently. But I found his bachelor's thesis that he had to write at the University of Wisconsin in 1924 about the economic aspects of building highways in Wisconsin, because there weren't any. And I'm going to read it. 1924, yeah. There's nothing. That's yesterday. I knew him. This is not ancient history.
It's not. And it will be back. No, it will.
Yeah. Born in Leda, Illinois. Yeah. So anyway, the Sioux have showed up, but they don't tell you the Sioux have showed up. Okay. She doesn't tell you. It's a perfect story. So the two daughters are out walking. She shivered not because of any premonition, but simply because the air was cool in the brush by the spring. She glanced across the narrow creek and saw a paint-striped face. Before she could finish her scream, the Indian had leapt the creek and smothered her mouth. Okay, so now the kids are gone. Instantly. At the cabin, they heard that single throat-tearing scream instantly muffled. They knew what had to be done. They had planned it because this day might come to any frontier farm. Well, now the plan. Hannah Harris scooped up the baby boy, Willie, and hesitated only to cry out, the girls? The father, doesn't say anything. The father, already inside the cabin, handed one rifle to his eldest son as he took the other for himself. To Jim, who was 16, he barked, the axe, boy. Well, what they're going to do, Mama's going to take whoever she can and go hide. And the men are going to go fight and die. That's the plan.
They're going to fight a delaying action. They're alone, and they know that if they are set upon, they will be outnumbered.
Yeah, so this is on page 2 of the Valentine 35-cent edition. Oscar and Jim and Zeke did not defend. They attacked. With the father going first, they ran toward the spring and met the Indians in the brush. Fighting there, they bought a little time for the three to hide down by the river, and they paid for it with their lives. No story of how the fight went. It's just one paragraph. Some people could make 30 pages out of that. What's important dramatically is not how the fight went or who got in this blow or who got in that blow. It's they went, they fought, they died. And so that's all she says. I have a feeling, like Woodhouse would write his Jeeves and Wooster stuff. He would write out the plot, and it'd be a page long, and then he'd go put all the jokes in.
Good enough. You
feel almost like Dorothy Johnson wrote a longer story and then chopped out 90% of it.
Perfect. She's got a good razor. Yeah. So the mother, Hannah, the mother chose another way of buying time. She heard the invaders chopping at whatever they found in the cabin. Blah, 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 blah. Then she thrust the baby into Johnny's arms and said fiercely, "You take care of him and don't you let him go until they kill you." She kissed Johnny on the forehead and she kissed the baby twice because he was so helpless and because he was blessedly not crying.
So I don't know if we just want to go through the whole story, but the two daughters end up living with the Indians, and one of them stays with them and one of them gets to go home. I mean, that's all interesting.
Well,
I don't know what to say.
Let me read a little chunk here. Bottom of 4, top of 5. Dorothy tells us about it here in mid-century American language. The mother, Hannah, was taken along by the same route. The Indians have taken the girls and the mom. The mother, Hannah, was taken along by the same route about a mile behind them, but she did not know they were still alive. One of them she saw again 6 years later. The other girl she never saw again. For hours she went on, stumbling, praying, "Lord, in thy mercy, make them kill me fast." But they did not. When they did not, she let hope flicker. And when they camped that night, she began to ask timidly, "God, would you help me get away?" She had no food that night and no water. An Indian had tied her securely. The following day, her captors caught up with a larger party, carrying much loot and driving 3 other white women. They were younger than Hannah. That was what saved her. When she was an old woman, blah, 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 blah. Saved her from what?
Saved her from death? Saved her from becoming one of them?
I figure that they were younger than Hannah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is a Dorothy M. Johnson rape euphemism here.
Yeah.
She did not tell how she could still hear the piercing shrieks of the other women, even when she was far enough into the woods so that she dared to run. Anyway, so she escaped.
She gets back and she finds Johnny. Johnny is not that smart. Johnny is special.
Dull.
Special child. So he has done what he was asked to do. He clutched the baby and saved the baby. Hannah gets married to Lincoln Bartlett. And you read in the middle of 7, and this killed me. This is good stuff. The baby, Willie, did not live to grow up in spite of the sacrifices that had been made for him. He died of diphtheria. When Link Bartlett dug a little grave, Hannah sat stern but dry-eyed on a slab bench, cradling the still body in her arms. The dull boy, Johnny, burst out hoarsely. "Wasn't no use after all, was it?" And his mother understood, and she told him strongly, "Oh, yes, it was. It was worthwhile, all you did. He's dead now, but he died in my arms with a roof over him. I'll know where he's buried. It ain't as if the Indians had butchered him someplace that I'd never know." And I thought that was just perfect on the value of life, So Willie's not even a character in this story. He doesn't live long enough to be one. Was it worth it that he ever lived? Assuming he was real, is it worth it that all of those babies lived or died over thousands of years? Absolutely. That they die doesn't change
that
they lived.
Yep.
Yeah. That hit me between the eyes.
Ugh.
I would have marked it if the ancient papyrus upon which this is printed could have held a mark. Every time I tried to take a note in this book, it would push through the page.
I always pretend that's what would happen if I took notes, so I don't. She carried the body across the room and laid it tenderly in the box that had been Willie's bed and would be his coffin. She turned to her other son and said, "Johnny, come sit on my lap." He was a big boy, 12 years old, and was puzzled by this invitation, as he was puzzled about so many things. Always the mother. Ugh, I can't even read the rest of it.
Awkwardly, he sat on her knees, and awkwardly he permitted her to cuddle his head against her shoulder. "How long since your mother kissed you?" she asked, and he mumbled back, "Don't know." She kissed his forehead. "You're my big boy. You're my Johnny." I want to skip down. Johnny says it was him that mattered most, I guess, because, he was given the child and told, you don't give him up till you're dead. Hannah looked down at him, shocked. "He was my child, and I loved him," she said. "It was him I worried about, but it was you I trusted." The boy blinked and scowled. His mother bowed her head. "I never said so. I thought you knowed that. When I give him to you that day, Johnny boy, I put more trust in you than I did in the Lord God." That was the thing he always remembered, the time his mother made him understand that for a while he had been more important than God. That's some gut punch writing.
Yeah.
If you let yourself get caught up in the story, which is really what you want, right?
Yeah, if you don't want to do that, don't read it. Go read John Dos Passos, The 42nd Parallel. You can't get caught up in it.
Oh, I have these silly Audible things that I listen to when I'm doing repetitive work, and they're fluffy and fine, and they never gut punch you. If they did, you'd have to stop your work. Although sometimes they do. So we were talking about the list. I want to put a Dean Koontz novel on our list. Speaking of fluff, easy entertainment that hits you really hard. So I have one of those for us in the future.
Yeah, theologically suspect, right?
Yeah, let me dilate on this point for a minute. So the writers who write for a living, you may sneer at them and you may say, well, they're no J.D. Salinger, who wrote his one important book and then was silent. The prophet didn't speak again. The guys that are putting out 3 books a year, 4 or 5 books a year, they know how to write. All those Reacher stories, Jack Reacher stories, what's his name? Lee Stiles? Lee Child, yeah. They're well written. I love all that stuff because they have to know how to write because they got to sell it. I've said this before. If they're of good character or have a decent metaphysics, eventually they're going to hit you really hard. They're going to write about true things. So there are authors that are really good that do not make anybody's important list.
This lady actually makes the list and you don't know it, probably, dear listener. She wrote the short story, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which, a huge, important movie was made about or based upon. And then A Man Called Horse, which it was made into a pretty big budget Western in the, I don't know, like 70 or 71. So you've heard of her work. I said it was Dustin Hoffman on the last show. That's not true. It's Richard Harris, I think, which is odd, but it kind of makes sense. In this story, it's
the first Dumbledore,
a Boston dandy that's abducted by the Indians. So it kind of makes sense that you could put like Richard Harris in there, and it could be an Englishman, adopted, another kind of dandy. He's not gay. He's English, abducted by the Indians. 2 years later, they find that these girls are still around, and they seek to ransom them. One of them comes back. One of them chooses not to, which is something that's important to understand, I think. If you care about this stuff, you can go out and do a little research about people who were abducted by the North American Aboriginal people. And you'll see some famous pictures of the young woman in a cotton dress with the tattoos on her face that she had gotten while she was in captivity. You can read these people's accounts, and more often than not, and they were abducted, they didn't want to come back. And I believe that the reasons there are twofold. One, shame. And like Dorothy Johnson, I will leave that there and you can fill in all the blanks. 2, 2, North American farm life, homestead life in the 1800s was no treat. Not that it was a treat for the North American Indian, but it was a different kind of thing. It was a more freewheeling thing, a less structured thing. I think that you can read these stories. Let me go ahead and make some people mad because it's just not a show if I don't. You can read these stories and understand why some people that come to this continent do not assimilate. It's hard to keep a schedule. It's hard to, quote unquote, act like a lady or do what you're supposed to do or whatever. You know, Dorothy Johnson writes about the duties of these women that would be abducted or were women of the tribe, preparing food, tanning hides, and so on. Their work was never done, but they weren't dealing with Hester Prynne style Puritan bullshit either, right? Civilization comes with a psychological cost that some people are just not willing to pay.
Well, there's something else I thought that was put very... I scrolled in an exclamation point next to this one. This is on page 19. So Sarah goes home. Sarah, who had been called Blue Jay, was hard to tame, they said in the settlement. Her mother fretted over her heathen ways. The girl could not even make bread. I can tan hides. I can butcher a buffalo and make pemmican. I can pitch a teepee and pack it on a horse to move. But those skills were not valued in a white woman, and Sarah found the settlement not quite heaven. She missed the constant talk and laughter of the close-pitched teepees. She had to learn a whole new system of polite behavior. There was dickering and trading and bargaining instead of a proud exchanging of fine gifts. A neighbor boy, slouching on a bench outside the cabin, talking to her stepfather while he got up courage to ask whether Sarah was at home, was less flattering as a suitor than a young warrior painted and feathered showing off on a spotted horse. Sometimes Sarah felt she had left heaven behind her, but she never went back to it. But right there, is without telling you what to think, because Dorothy Johnson doesn't do that. But there you are with Sarah, and Sarah's got to sit in the house and wait for this guy to get up the nerve to come and talk to her, when she could have had warriors, riding their horses. You could see both sides, couldn't you?
Yeah, nothing's all good or all bad.
I got some daughters. I mean, if we had some warriors show up here, give me a horse for the privilege of walking out with them, well, I don't know.
So this is interesting. Dorothy's slipping the knife in over and over. So she marries Herman Schwartz, the blacksmith, and their first baby was born 6 months later. Her oldest child was 6, and her second child was 3 when the Indian...
6 months.
Oh, no, 6. Well, no. So this is the third paragraph down on 19, Karl. Sarah's oldest child was 6, and her second child was 3 when the Indian man appeared at the door of her cabin and stood silently peering in. "Get out of here," she cried, seizing the broom. He answered in a Sioux tongue, "Blue Jay has forgotten." She gave Horse Ears a shrill welcome in his own language, and the 3-year-old started to cry. She lifted a hand for an accustomed slap, but let it fall. Indian mothers do not slap their children. Now, they wrote in here where she got switched for putting something on the family Bible. Once at home, she had been switched by her father for putting a dish on the great family Bible. Now, she also learned in the Indian village to not touch, medicine and, and to be respectful of things there too. But then at the end, but Indian women don't strike their children, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorothy just leaves it there.
Yeah, she left another thing. I didn't know if you caught it. That's what I wanted to mention. Right. When she was 17, she married the blacksmith Herman Schwartz, and their first baby was born. Not 9 months later, 6 months later. But she doesn't comment on it. It's just, we'll just leave that there. That's a bit of characterization. What kind of a girl is Sarah?
Well, I'll tell you what she is. She's gone native. Yeah. I got one of them. Yeah, so Horse Ears comes, and he asks, does Blue Jay's man make much meat? Is he a man with many honors in war? He makes much meat. He has counted coup many times. We are rich. I came to find out those things, he answered. In my lodge there is only one woman. She understood, and her heart leapt with the flattery. He had traveled far in some danger to find out that all was well with her. If not, there was refuge in his teepee, not only now, she realized, but any time, forever. "Get out," the blacksmith ordered, and the Indian obeyed without a word. Herman strode towards her in silent, awesome, blazing fury. She did not cringe. She braced her body against the table. He gave her a blow across the face that rocked her and blinded her. She picked up the heavy iron skillet. "Don't you ever do that again, or I'll kill you."
Yeah, and you pause right there, and you think, uh-oh, things are bad. And this is where we moderns, we're like, uh-oh, this isn't right. This is, domestic violence or whatever. He glared at her with fierce pride, knowing that she meant what she said. "I don't reckon I'll have to do it again," he said complacently. "If I ever set eyes on that savage again, I'll kill him. You know that, don't you, you damn squaw? Talks cheap." So there's some ugly talk here. Okay, forget that. So she goes back down to the spring. So we have a nice bookend to the story. It starts at the spring. It ends at the spring. She was singing. As she went down to the spring for a bucket of water, she was singing. Her girlhood was gone, and her freedom was far behind her. She had 2 crying children and was pregnant again. But 2 men loved her, and both of them had just proved it. 40 years later, her 3rd child was elected to the state legislature, and she went, a frightened white-haired widow, to see him there. She was proud, but never so proud as she had been on a summer day 3 months before he was born.
Throwing those red pills.
When the 2 men came.
Take your medicine. Aunt Dorothy's passing out red pills.
With no comments, just laying it out there, and you can think what you like. Yeah, that's a heck of a story. If I had to teach creative writing, which would be terrible because I don't do it very much, I might teach this story.
How in the fuck would you write this story? I have no idea how she would even do this. Unbelievable.
It's an iceberg story. Okay, so, like 91% of the iceberg's under the water. And so you imagine the whole thing, and then you sink most of it. And then you just write the bits that appear above the top. You let everybody else figure out the rest. Which I think is the way to do it. I've read a whole bunch of Walker Percy, and he I don't think he always does it very well. But he writes about the vocation of the author. I mean, he's definitely got things he wants to say. I think he and Shelby Foote would argue about this, and Shelby would say, no, you can't have that. But he probably did too. But you've got ideas and thoughts you want to get across, but you can't let the reader know. Because once they figure out they're being preached at, it's no longer a story, it's no longer entertainment, and you're going to put it down. Or it might be like Handmaid's Tale, and you only read it because it has the message that you think ought to be put forward. And it's not for its novelistic quality. So, dear listener out there, if you're going to be a writer, this is Writing 101. Whatever it is you believe, great. Believe it real hard. Think of your story. Write your story. Do not tell your beliefs to your reader. They'll come through fine in the story, but you can't make it happen.
Let me argue with that.
Go ahead.
I agree, actually. But if this is an iceberg story and 90% of it's below the surface, you have to have the rest of it. As the reader, you have to have the rest of it. Most people that read won't have it. They're not going to have it. They're going to read this, and it's just these terse little sentences. She put more trust in Johnny that day, and she threatened her husband with a skillet later, and the boy made it to the legislature. The midwit and below, it's going to read like a Dr. Seuss story, like a children's book. So this requires a reading public that can do the damn thing. And it's not just do it, like you have to have something. Like you have to be a person. You have to have a personality and a sense of life when you come to it as a reader. I'm bad and good about projecting when I read these books. But I have a life and I bring who I am to the book. So when I read it, it can speak to me because I know what I am. A lot of these people aren't anything. So when they read it, there's nothing there,
Well, maybe they aren't, but the typical modes of entertainment now don't leave a lot of room for you to be much. There are certainly people that aren't going to, these books are not for them. But there's more That's like OGB. We're not for everybody.
Clearly not.
We'd like to be for more. So come on, join us. Maybe you're one of them. But we're not for everybody. But we're for more than think that we're for them. If that makes any sense. So there you are sitting on your phone, which gives you endless entertainment, scrolling through Twitter, watching Netflix. It's all done for you. Even the visuals are done for you. You don't even have to use your power of imagination. You don't have to fill any gaps of the characters. Or even, they just tell you. You can know exactly what Harry Potter's thinking because Rowling tells you. Rather than just having him be the hero astride the world, and then you have to figure out what he's thinking. So the sorts of entertainments that you pick, I think, can probably open you up a little bit more. Your own experiences that will respond to the stories that leave enough gaps for you to fit in there. It's kind of why I like all of that Bach intellectual music. That album you hated, the Hilary Hahn one?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't hate it. I just don't need that.
I like it. I like it when the music is somewhat sparse and geometrical because there's a lot more room for me in that music. And I love the syrupy romantic stuff too, but there's not so much room for me in that.
Yeah.
I don't know that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, it does.
So that's Flame on the Frontier. That is a dynamite first story in this little collection. It's only 200 pages. I expect when I check out this book 2 weeks from now, when this comes out, when I check used copies of this book, I expect them to have all vanished, dear listener.
For sure.
From you snatching them up.
The next story, I don't know. It's not that great. The Unbeliever. It's okay. It's good. The
Unbeliever.
But it's not, boy, the first one is a killer. The Unbeliever is about a cynical fellow who had spent time with the Crow Indians, and then as an elderly, fading character, got a job as a scout for the cavalry, and had a very dismissive and cynical view of the spirituality and ways of the Crow Indians, though, and he knew them, and he knew those ways. Yeah, there's a twist on the end. I don't know. It wasn't as great. I liked Prairie Kid.
Mm-hmm. Tell me what you liked. Elmer Merrick. When Elmer Merrick was 11 years old, he marched an outlaw off the Ainsworth Place at the point of a gun.
There you go. There you go.
Well, there you go.
That's
That's the plot.
It's just the story about a kid who had intuitions and understood the ways of people, understood the stakes, understood the world about him, and could act and did. I love that. It's the kind of, if I had an 11-year-old boy, well, too late for that. If I had an 11-year-old grandson, I would hope that he could do this and would figure it out and would. Bad guy comes, has designs essentially on his sister. Is his sister? Mother.
No, Charlotte Ainsworth.
Oh, yeah, Miss Charlotte, neighbor lady.
Lute was courting Charlotte Ainsworth, and Elmer considered her a fool and a tenderfoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lute is his friend, his idol, and this pretty girl comes out. And, well, what's the bad guy's name?
Oh, my goodness. What is his name? Where is it?
The outlaw.
Just calls him the stranger, Mr. Buck Sadler.
Buck Sadler? That's a good name.
The boy, all he has is an old Civil War era cap and ball pistol. And the bad man shows up, Buck, and he has designs on this young Eastern woman that's there in Montana. Elmer doesn't care for that. It's a cap and ball pistol. These old revolvers, you'd carry an empty chamber. They did not have a safety device that would block a hammer strike. So if you dropped the hammer or you dropped the weapon on its hammer, it would fire if there was a cartridge under the hammer. Or if you bang the hammer while it's in your holster, it could fire and shoot you in the foot. So people mostly carried 5 rounds in those. Well, this kid was worried. His dad left and pretty much said, "You're in charge." He loads the pistol up with 6 rounds. The bad guy's there. Elmer doesn't like it at all. Charlotte's dumb as hammer. Well, she's green. She doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know that Buck is a threat, really. Elmer does, and Elmer decides that he needs to help this man go away. The stranger said, I can't have a lady beating my time with this here little girl. I'm going to give her a present, too. He dug in his pocket, fished around a little, and brought out a coin. He opened Verena's hand and closed her fingers over the gift. Tear-stained, she stared at it. Miss Charlotte said, Mr. Sadler, you can't do that. It's a double eagle. He said with reproach, well, you wouldn't want me to take back what I give her, would you, Miss Charlotte? No, sir, that's for the little lady. He looked so smug that Elmer wanted to hit him. And then he said the thing that scared Elmer, plenty more where that came from.
No, why does that scare him?
A double eagle is a 1-ounce gold coin. It's over 90% fine. I just looked it up. The melt value of an 1870 gold eagle is $1,793. He just gave a little girl $2,000.
That's a nice present.
For a few seconds, Elmer forgot to breathe. The man might possibly have one gold piece or a couple, but if there's plenty more where that come from, Elmer realized he never earned it.
Yeah, and he's the only man there because his dad is sick. He's going to, spoiler, Slope ends up dying, but they're taking him off to the doctor. Lute, who is the gentleman that Miss Charlotte is involved with.
Yeah, they took the dad to doctor.
And so Elmer has the responsibility to take care of the two women, his sister and the tenderfoot Charlotte, who doesn't know anything.
Page 49. Never before had he been able to see so clearly what was in an adult's mind. The revelation startled him so much for a moment. He was dazed by his own cleverness, and then, with desperate cunning, he arrived at the answer to that dismal question. What are you going to do about Verena? Now, he had been worried about what he was going to do about this little girl, because she's his little sister. She can't do anything. She's a pain in the ass in every respect. And he wasn't sure what he would do if he had to make hard choices like the mom and the dad did in the first story. If his dad dies, what does he do with the girl, with his sister? He's been put in charge. He doesn't know. Well, he's starting to figure it out. So he sits down and he says, Worm, I think Steve's got a worm here. I want to unload my gun. This'll do it, he remarked, and Buck watched him slit-eyed, not moving. Elmer took his own sweet time. Never once did he move quickly. He kept the old cavalry Colt carefully pointed at the wall while he worked, with the casual carefulness of one who had always handled firearms and had not pointed a gun at anyone since he got his ears boxed for it at the age of 4. Delicately, he pried 4 caps off the nipples and laid them on the table in plain sight. Painstakingly, he reamed the powder and ball from those 5 chambers, and Buck could count if he chose. Buck relaxed enough to comment, mighty pretty tune you're playing there, girlie. Miss Charlotte did not relax at all.
Yeah. Is she sitting at the melodeon? I can imagine her sitting ramrod tall. Just, that's a good way to get the tension of the scene. So he's unloaded all 5, because that's all the 5 that you would have loaded, as a trick to make Buck think that he's defenseless.
Yeah. He said, then he stands up, yawning. Buck Sadler demanded, where do you think you're going? A person can go outside, can't they? He answered with elaborate dignity, maybe I'm going to hunt rabbits. Buck grinned. Hunting rabbits was what gentlemen passengers were invited to do when stagecoaches with lady passengers made a comfort stop. Ladies picked flowers. Yeah.
I'm going to use that when we're driving. We got to go hunt rabbits.
Powder your nose.
You ladies go pick some flowers.
You was gone quite a while, Buck commented a little later. I come back, Elmer pointed out. Your horse is down. I'll get the lantern if you'd like to take a look. There was nothing wrong with that horse. He was cornered and puzzled. How could he be cornered by a small boy who had just unloaded his gun in plain sight? Buck Sadler relaxed and grinned. We'll be right back, he promised Miss Charlotte, and the little girl can play me another tune. So complete was his disdain that he did not even reach up to the peg for his gun belt. Elmer came close to choking, not because he wanted to draw a deep breath of relief and could not. That had been one of the maybes. So
Yeah, so a couple pages before, Elmer has figured out he's got to do some plan, and he works it all out. He began to figure, if I do this, he'll do that, and maybe he won't. Well, if I do that, what'll he do? How do I get rid of this grown man, this bandit, this armed bandit, and I'm the only guy in the house? He doesn't think to himself, should I get rid of him? He thinks, how? It's what I tell my kids. It's what being a grown-up is all about, at least a grown-up man, is when the shit job comes along, there's nobody else that's going to do it. And so you don't think, well, am I going to do it?
Yep.
You just think, how am I going to do it? Like that time when the rabbit died in the window well. And it's starting to smell, and everyone's saying, oh, there's a dead rabbit with flies and maggots in the window well. Well, I'm not going to say, to anybody, I'm not going to say, Melissa, go clean out that rabbit. There's no hope. I'm the only one that's getting that rabbit out, which is not as bad as Buck Sadler, but that's what it is. That's responsibility. Elmer's a cool character.
Yeah. You go out, he says, hey, your horse is down. And Buck's like, that horse is fine. He's like, well, I'll get the lantern. You can go look. And he thinks, well, the kid doesn't have a gun. I mean, he's unloaded the gun. He's not armed. Whatever. I'll go look. There's nothing wrong with that horse, he growled. Nothing, not a thing, agreed Elmer. He's all cinched up and ready to travel. Sadler laughed. I ain't traveling nowhere, not till I get ready. You're ready now, Elmer told him softly, and this gun says so. Elmer sneered. I seen you unload it. You seen me unload 5 chambers. I got 1 left, and that's all it takes. You want to find out for sure? Checkmate. Dummy. Yep. Perfect.
Yeah. The one mistake the kid makes is he doesn't have it cocked yet.
Yep. That's okay.
But Buck didn't think of that. Single action, it won't fire. Well, it might fire if you drop it, but it won't fire until you pull that hammer back. And it's a big gun, and he's a little guy. Yeah, for me, the best part of the story, he's thinking that he's going to get rid of Verena because he can't take care of her. Well, he doesn't get rid of her. So at the bottom of 54, he's going to give money to Miss Charlotte to take care of his sister. If you was to take her back east with you, I'd turn over our stock to your brother, and maybe it'd bring enough to pay for raising her. I can earn the rest after I get bigger. And she says, the tenderfoot, oh, Elmer, I might not go back east. I don't want her raised out here, Elmer cried out frantically. Ma always said this ain't no country for women. It will be, Miss Charlotte promised. It's going to be before long. Men like you and Mr. Kimball will make it so. This is going to be a good place to live.
Oh, I got to read the rest of it, if I can keep it together. He was not a man anymore. He was 11 years old and had nothing more to do with problems that were too big for him. He had already run off the bad guy, and now Verena's taken care of. She's taken, the load is gone from him. He put his hands up to his face and began to sob. He cried for a long time, and neither Lute nor Miss Charlotte said a word or made a move. When he was through, Lute spoke as if nothing had happened. Tomorrow, he said, you can be a kid if you want to, if you haven't forgotten how. You got that coming to you, but tonight I need a partner. Until dawn, Elmer stood in the doorway with his new gun in his hand, the peacemaker that had been Buck Sadler's. Lute prowled around farther away with the rifle, listening and watching. Nobody came. 12 years later, Verena Merrick spent her double eagle to buy her wedding clothes. Elmer, stiff and solemn in a new suit, tall and sturdy, a good hand at anything he undertook, gave the bride away. He had almost forgotten how hard he tried to give Verena away once before. Oh my God. That's a 17-page story.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Yep. Roller coaster.